news recently, the one thing you know for certain about the accused gunman in the massacre in Colorado over the weekend is that he was a crazed right-wing anti-trans extremist. This is a man who was radicalized by this show and by the Twitter account Libs of TikTok to hate transgendered people. And that's why this man walked into a bar, a gay bar, with a gun and started murdering people. He did that because he was taught by right-wing media outlets to despise and fear the non-binary community. And that's why this show and Libs of TikTok must be hauled into court and bankrupted for what we've done so that we can never provoke this kind of horrifying violence ever again. That's the real lesson of this mass shooting. So that is what they've been telling you again and again and again on various news channels for the past 3 days. And we're not overstating that, by the way. Here's a selection of it.
It's a campaign being driven by members of Congress and conservative influencers on social media, as well as the right's most favorite TV network, Fox News.
Those incidents at drag events I mentioned a few moments ago, they happened within the context of conservative media personalities fear-mongering against queer folks.
Respected messengers from TV networks saying that these people are wrong and they're trying to damage your children.
We have a long history of the LGBTQ community being victimized, demonized by especially right-wing media and Republicans.
You have anti-LGBTQ rhetoric spewed on the most watched hours on Fox News at a regular clip against the U.S. military, against gay men and women, against gay teachers, against their right to exist.
So Fox News, in its most watched hours, is attacking even the U.S. military, and of course gay men and women and teachers too. They're advocating, quote, against their right to exist. In other words, they've been calling for genocide. That would be us. Now, that's a stout claim, but no one has made it more often than NBC News. In particular, its two self-described disinformation reporters, Ben Collins and Brandy Zadrozny. These two are outraged that anyone would dare criticize the genital mutilation of children, or drag shows for fifth graders, or creepy weirdo teachers explaining the mechanics of oral sex to 9-year-olds. Pointing out that any of that is happening is hate, and it gets people killed. Here's a highly emotional Ben Collins of NBC News making that very point yesterday morning.
Am I doing something wrong here? Here are some headlines that I wrote the last 6 months. Fueled by internet's far-right machine, anti-LGBTQ threats shut down trans rights and drag events. Remember, there was a drag event happening in Colorado.
Well, what do we do about public officials at local level, state level, federal level who try to inject the fear of the very word transgender into school issues?
They get more clicks for it, and they end up on Tucker Carlson. They end up on the highest-rated show on cable news. And last night, by the way, Tucker attacked my colleague Brandy Zadrozny, who was co-bound on almost all these stories. Not me, he attacked Brandy, of course, but he attacked Brandy. And he went right back into this idea that some they is trying to groom your kids, trying to sexualize your children, right?
Yeah.
Who's the they, first of all?
Yeah.
And second of all of her reporting was right. All of it was right.
Oh, it's all about me, of course, says Ben Collins. But more to the point, how dare anyone criticize the august disinformation reporter and former college librarian, Brandy Zadrozny, because as Ben Collins pointed out, her reporting was right. Well, since you brought it up, Ben Collins, was her reporting right? Well, not entirely. Do you remember when Brandy Zadrozny told you several hundred times that the accused shooter, Anderson Lee Aldrich, was inspired by hatred for the non-binary community that he learned on this show? Do you remember that? Well, actually, it turns out, we discovered last night, that Anderson Lee Aldrich is, drumroll please, part of the non-binary community. He doesn't hate them, he is one. In a court filing, Aldrich's lawyers wrote this, quote, Anderson Aldrich is non-binary. They use they, them pronouns, and for the purposes of all formal filings will be addressed as Mix Aldrich. Mix Aldrich, that's the shooter, the non-binary shooter. Let that sink in. First, get your chuckling under control and ponder what this means. What it means is that virtually everything that NBC News has told you about this shooting in Colorado is not only wrong, it is the opposite of the truth. It is all a grotesque and filthy lie. It wasn't news reporting, It turns out to have been the most transparent sort of political propaganda. And for once, they have been busted flat out in public trying to sell political propaganda to an unsuspecting public under the guise of news. It's not the first time they've done it. They won't stop doing it. Oh, but they did it a lot in this case. Here's another clip, another instance of Ben Collins trying to once again pass off political slogans as news.
There are 5 dead people in a strip mall because it was the only place they felt safe as gay or trans people in this town in Colorado Springs.
He's emotional telling you that. There are 5 dead people in a strip mall because that was the only place they felt safe as gay or trans people in this town of Colorado Springs. So it turns out it's the town's fault too, because there are a lot of Christians, everybody knows, in Colorado Springs. So gay people feel terrified there because Christians are dangerous. And all these terrified gay people were huddled together for safety when this Fox News-addled anti-trans bigot walked in and started shooting them for being trans folk. That was Ben Collins' quote, reporting. Well, the only problem is not all the victims were gay. One of them, at least one of them, was at the club with his girlfriend. Oh, details. Ben Collins doesn't let details get in the way of an effective political attack, and it would have been an effective political attack had not reality interceded. But he doesn't care. Neither does the White House. Here's the White House telling you that because a non-binary person shut up a gay bar, you can't own a gun.
This attack also comes amidst a rise in violent rhetoric and threats against the LGBTQI+ people across the country. While we don't know yet for certain the motive of this attack, hate has no place in this country, and neither do military-style assault rifles, which is why we will continue to push for an assault weapons ban.
It makes sense. You following the reasoning? So when the trans community opens fire on itself, we need an assault weapons ban because why? Because you're a hater. Pete Buttigieg, of course, couldn't pass up a moment like this. It's not like Pete Buttigieg wants to talk about how things are going over at the transportation department, which he supposedly runs. Short answer, not well. No, Pete Buttigieg wants to talk about identity. He always wants to talk about identity. And the funny, ironic thing is, until just a few years ago, Buttigieg wouldn't even admit that he was gay. He hid that and then lied about it for reasons he has never been asked to explain. Why not? But whatever. Now he is happy to use his sexual orientation as a cudgel to bash you repeatedly in the face into submission. Quote, here's the latest. If you're a politician or media figure who sets up the LGBTQ community to be hated and feared, not because any of us have ever harmed you, but because you find it useful, then don't you dare act surprised when this kind of violence follows. Don't you dare act surprised. Don't you dare. All right, fair enough, we won't dare. But honestly, we're a little surprised to learn that the anti-trans shooter is himself trans. Were you surprised by that, Pete Buttigieg? Now that you're admitting you're gay after lying about it? Since we're talking about identity, what do you have to say about that? Oh, nothing, weirdly. Pete Buttigieg hasn't said anything. Nor has he apologized for attacking other people on false pretenses. Guess who else hasn't apologized? Ben Collins or Brandy Zadrozny. Yesterday, they were accusing us of getting 5 people murdered. Now that the story they were telling has turned out to be a lie, the opposite of what they said it was, they're pretending that nothing has changed at all. Ooh, they are liars. Cold-blooded liars. It's amazing to watch. And so is the company they work for. NBC News just ran this article after we know that the shooter was himself trans. They ran this headline with a straight face, quote, right-wing influencers and media doubled down on anti-LGBTQ rhetoric in the wake of the Colorado shooting. Can you imagine writing that, knowing what we know? They had no problem with it. Then an editor at NBC called Benjamin Goggin added this, quote, if the shooter is non-binary, it doesn't change the fact the right-wing media is continuing to stoke hatred towards LGBTQ people after 5 people were killed at a gay bar. Right. So it's hatred. So if you're against genital mutilation of children or bringing toddlers to drag shows, you're against the LGBTQ community. Well, of course, that's insane. There's nothing anti-gay about that. Most gay people aren't in favor of genital mutilation or bringing toddlers to drag shows. There's nothing wrong with those opinions. They're the right opinions, and all decent people understand that. What is indecent, what is wrong, is lying about a mass shooting, which NBC did. So how are the rest of the media handling this? Well, CNN, for its part, is just denying that the shooter is really non-binary. Couldn't be. It couldn't be. It just couldn't be true. So they decided to continue misgendering Mix Aldrich. Watch this.
Attorneys for the accused shooter, Anderson Lee Aldrich, say in new court filings tonight that the suspect now identifies as non-binary. In a footnote to a motion asserting legal privileges, the public defenders say, quote, Anderson Aldrich is non-binary. They use they, them pronouns. Are you guys lawyers? I mean, you know, I don't know if, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, that's what he's now saying.
It sounds like they're trying to prepare a defense against a hate crimes charge.
Oh! So in this case, if the shooter claims to be non-binary, he's got to be lying about it. It's not real. So we're not going to call the non-binary shooter Mix or observe his pronoun request. In fact, the whole pronoun thing is gone. Biology is back. He was born a man, he's still a man. Oh, it's unbelievable. So what they're doing, of course, is using an actual tragedy, the murder of 5 people, for political reasons. And of course, it's not the first time they have done that. They're happy to use death for political advantage. They did it with George Floyd. They did it with Officer Brian Sicknick. And it's not the most recent anti-gay attack, by the way, that has turned out to be a total lie perpetuated by the media. Just a few days ago, a guy was caught throwing a rock at a gay bar in Hell's Kitchen, New York, on camera. So the media dutifully went out and interviewed the owner, who said, quote, it feels like yet another manifestation of hate against our community. A lot of big social media accounts ran with that story. More hate, more hate. So then, this is a story that didn't get quite as much coverage, the police arrested the guy who did it. His name is Sean Cullion, and he was upset because of a dispute involving a friend. He didn't target the place because it's a gay bar. In fact, and we're quoting now from the rock thrower, I'm gay myself. I mean, come on. Shouldn't someone apologize? Shouldn't someone admit that they got the facts wrong and slandered half the country on the basis of wrong facts? No, never admit it, never apologize. Keep moving on. Pick another story to beat you over the head with. So Matt Walsh has been following these stories. He has been repeatedly attacked by name by NBC News for his dangerous anti-trans, murder-inspiring bigotry. We wanted to see how he's holding up in the face of that. Matt Walsh, great to see you tonight. You were called out repeatedly by name, not just some guy, but Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh is responsible for this mass murder. Now that we learned what we learned last night, how do you assess this?
Well, I mean, we're all owed apologies, but I'm not gonna. I've seen these people enough to know that I'm not gonna sit around holding my breath waiting for the apology. I think it's just a really kind of amazing to watch, especially that clip you played of CNN, where they immediately just deny this person's self-identity. And I think that the point that we want to get across is that if you're on the left, okay, you can't do that. That is not available to you. You're not allowed to do that by your own precedent, by your own philosophy, you know, by the rules that you have set, and we're going to hold you to them. Now, you and I, Tucker, we're allowed to say about this mass shooter who calls himself non-binary, we're allowed to say, that's nonsense, I don't care. Non-binary isn't even a thing. You can't even be that. But on the left, they've made it clear that the only evidence that needs to be provided in order to prove that someone is non-binary is that they say it. And what they've also told us repeatedly is that the idea that somebody would adopt one of these identities, you know, in a self-serving way, like for example, a convicted male felon who's in prison who all of a sudden discovers his inner female identity, to speculate that maybe he's doing that so he could have access to female inmates in women's prisons. We're told that, you can't speculate that. That's an awful thing to even suggest. So that's them saying that, which means that they're stuck with this. I mean, as far as they're concerned, this person is non-binary. Now, what is he actually? I don't know. I think it's pretty clear he's just a crazy guy. That's what actually happened. And the other point I want to make here is that what we need to realize with the left-wing media is that when there's a mass shooting, if we don't know everything about the person's life, and we haven't seen all of their social media posts within the first 2 hours after the shooting, it almost always means that this is not a right-winger. Like, if it's a right-winger who committed the attack, we're going to know everything about them immediately. But it was very suspicious and conspicuous that up until 2-3 days passed, and we knew almost nothing about this guy. All we had was the speculation from the media, and then this shoe drops telling us that, actually, he identifies as non-binary. So that's not a coincidence. They gave themselves time, right, to get their preferred narrative out, before the truth got out.
Well, that's exactly right. And in fact, all of this speculation, all of it wrong, has taken place before we had any real facts about this guy. In fact, I think we just got the first video of the shooter, and I want to put it on the screen now.